I built this building. I don't mean I laid the bricks, though God knows I've hauled enough metaphorical mortar in my life to qualify for a union card. I mean I breathed life into the steel and glass skeleton of Meridian Systems back when cloud computing sounded like a weather forecast and my office was a repurposed supply closet in Tacoma. I know exactly how the AC hums on the 40th floor because I approved the schematics. Know why the carpet in the lobby is that specific shade of slate gray because it hides coffee stains. But today I wasn't Elena Hart, the founder whose portrait hangs in the boardroom like a silent saint of industry. Today I was Ellie, a 50-something facilities temp wearing a polyester jumpsuit that smelled faintly of industrial lemon cleaner and other people's sweat. My hair, usually a blow-dried armor against the world, was pulled back into a severe practical bun. Oh, makeup. No Rolex, just a name tag that was crooked and a mop bucket on wheels that squeaked like a dying mouse. I was undercover, a cliché, maybe. But when you spend 20 years building a company on principles of integrity and grit, and then retire to the board only to hear whispers that your legacy is turning into a toxic frat house, you don't send a memo. You go to ground level. You put on the gray jumpsuit. You become the ghost in the machine who's an elevator bank B. The glass ones that offer a panoramic view of DC. A view usually reserved for the people who make six figures and decisions that ruin weekends. I was holding a spray bottle of disinfectant like a weapon. The door slid open on the 12th floor. Marketing and strategy. The air instantly changed. It stopped smelling like floor wax and started smelling like fear, ozone, and expensive anxiety-induced espresso. 3 young men walked in. They were that specific breed of corporate shark in training. 20-some, wearing suits that cost more than my first car and radiating an unearned confidence that usually evaporates the moment a quarterly review goes south. Leading the pack was a kid I'd later come to know as Miles. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been molded out of soft cheese, and entitlement was holding a venti latte with a casual disregard of someone who has never had to scrub a stain out of a rug in his life. He was pontificating to his disciples, 2 terrified-looking interns who were hanging on his every word like he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount rather than reciting buzzwords he'd skimmed from a linked influencer. "It's about optics, guys," Miles was saying, gesturing wildly with a hand holding the cup. "You have to dominate the space. If you're not the loudest voice in the room, you're the furniture. Meridian is a jungle. You eat or you get eaten." He spun around to emphasize his point. A theatrical pivot meant to showcase his Italian leather shoes. Physics, unfortunately for Miles, doesn't care about your career ambitions. The lid of his cup popped off. The latte didn't just spill, it exploded. It was a scalding brown geyser that coated the pristine glass wall, the stainless steel railing, a significant portion of the floor. It missed his suit by a miracle, but it managed to splash onto the toes of my work boots. Silence. Absolute heavy silence. I didn't move. I just looked at the puddle, then at the dripping wall. In my old life as the CEO, this would be the moment 3 assistants rushed in with napkins. In my old life, Miles would be apologizing profusely, his face the color of a tomato. But I wasn't the CEO. I was the help. Miles looked at the mess. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. He checked his watch, then sighed, a sound of immense burdened annoyance, as if the coffee had assaulted him personally. "God, what a disaster," he muttered. Then he turned his head slightly, locking eyes with the space above my left shoulder. "Hey," he snapped. I looked up. "Clean this mess up, janitor," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was bored. It was the tone you use for a voice-activated speaker that isn't listening. "Try to get it done before the VP gets on at the lobby. It looks unprofessional. You know, before I tell you what I did, let me just say, if you're the kind of person who enjoys watching entitled Little Empires crumble, do me a favor and hit up vote or subscribe button. It's the only thing that keeps my blood pressure down these days, knowing there are witnesses to the madness. Anyway, back to the puddle." My grip on the spray bottle tightened. My knuckles turned white. That split second, I had a flash of a memory, firing a VP of sales in 2008 for lying about his expense reports. I remembered the power of my own voice, the way I could clear a room with a raised eyebrow. I wanted to use that voice now. I wanted to peel the skin off his ego with a few well-chosen sentences. "Clean this mess up, janitor." The doors dinged. We were at the lobby. I took a breath. I forced my posture to slump. Let the fire in my eyes die down to a dull, subservient ember. This was the test. If I broke character now, I'd learn nothing. I'd just be the angry founder on a rampage. I needed to know how deep the rot went. "Yes, sir," I mumbled, keeping my head down. Miles didn't even acknowledge the response. He stepped over the puddle, his shoes clicking on the marble, and walked out into the lobby without looking back. Unbelievable. One of his minions whispered as they followed him. He stood alone in the elevator as the door started to close. I looked at the brown stain dripping down the glass. It looked like a tear or maybe an infection. I pulled a rag from my belt loop. I knelt down, and as I wiped up the lukewarm milk and sugar, I made a silent promise to the steel walls of the building I built. "Enjoy the clean floor, Miles," I thought, wringing out the rag with a violent twist. "Because I'm about to mop the floor with you." Elevators started to rise again, carrying me back up into the belly of the beast. I wasn't just cleaning up a spill anymore. I was gathering evidence, and the bucket was getting full. You learn a lot about a person by how they treat the people they think can't do anything for them. It's the ultimate litmus test of character. And at Meridian Systems, the pH balance was dangerously acidic. My first full week as Ellie was a masterclass in invisibility. Realized quickly that a gray jumpsuit works like a Harry Potter cloak. I could stand 3 feet away from a confidential merger discussion, furiously scrubbing a whiteboard, and the executives wouldn't lower their voices. I was furniture. I was a texture in the room somewhere between the potted foos and the water cooler. I was assigned to the 12th floor, Miles's hunting ground. I spent my mornings emptying recycling bins that smelled of stale Red Bull and protein bars. I spent my afternoons polishing the glass walls of the conference rooms, which gave me a front row seat to the corporate theater playing out inside. Miles, I learned, was an associate product manager. In startup terms, that meant he was a glorified clipboard carrier with delusions of Steve Jobs, but he played the game with a terrifying sociopathic efficiency. I watched him operate near the break room on Tuesday. A quiet girl from accounting, Sarah, I think her name tag said, was struggling with a heavy toner cartridge for the communal printer. Sarah was small, soft-spoken, the kind of employee who does 80% of the work and gets 0% of the credit. Miles walked by. He saw her struggling. He slowed down, looked at her, looked at the toner, and then checked his phone. "Excuse me, Miles?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Could you give me a hand? It's jammed." Miles didn't stop. "Got a hard stop in 5. "Sarah, call it. That's what they're paid for." He breezed past her, leaving her flushed and struggling. 10 minutes later, the vice president of operations, a man named Henderson, walked into the kitchenette. Henderson was a silver fox with a heavy watch and a louder laugh. Miles materialized out of thin air. It was like watching a vampire smell blood. "Mr. Henderson." Miles boomed, flashing a smile that was all teeth and ambition. "I was just looking for you. Had some thoughts on that Q3 supply chain bottleneck. I think we can optimize the vendor list by shaving off the bottom 10%. Henderson paused, pouring his coffee. "Is that so? Send me an email, son." "Already drafted, sir? Just wanted to put a bug in your ear." Miles laughed, a practiced hearty sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Here, let me get that stir for you." Handed the VP a wooden stir stick with the reverence of a priest handing over the Eucharist. I was 10 feet away, mopping a non-existent spot on the linoleum. The contrast was so sharp it could cut glass. To Sarah, Miles was a wall. To Henderson, he was a doormat. That night, back in my small, temporary apartment, a far cry from my Georgetown brownstone, I sat at a wobbly kitchen table with a notebook. No laptop, no iPad, just a cheap spiral-bound notebook and a big pen. I titled the page "The Rot." Underneath, I started a list. It wasn't a list of business strategy errors or coding bugs. It was a list of names and incidents. 1. Miles H. Disrespect of peers. Sycophantic behavior toward leadership. Refused to assist colleague in distress toner incident. 2. The marketing team mocking the reception staff's clothing choices with an earshot of the front desk. 3. HR director ignored a complaint about overtime theft because the manager brings donuts. The list grew. My hand cramped. The physical toll of the job was real, too. My back itched in a way it hadn't since I was 22 and waiting tables to pay for coding classes. My hands were dry and cracked from the industrial soap. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychic damage of watching my company, my life's work, hollowed out by people who viewed kindness as a weakness. On Thursday, I found myself in the elevator with Miles again. This time, he wasn't alone with interns. He was on a call, presumably with his mother or a very unfortunate girlfriend. "I'm telling you, babe, it's a lock," he was saying, staring at his reflection in the mirrored ceiling. "I've got Henderson eating out of my hand. The old guard is clueless. They're dinosaurs. I'll be running a division by Christmas. Just wait." He looked down and saw me. I was holding a trash bag, double knotted. He didn't mute the phone. He didn't turn away. He just looked at me with that dead-eyed boredom. "Hold on, babe," he said to the phone. Then to me, "You missed a spot in the conference room. Table sticky." I gripped the trash bag. It contained the remains of someone's tuna sandwich. The smell was revolting. "I'll get it right away," I said, my voice raspy. "Good," he said, turning back to his reflection. "Yeah, babe. I'm telling you, it's too easy. These people are sheep." I walked out on my floor, dragging the bag behind me. Sheep, I thought. Wolves often mistake silence for surrender, Miles. That's usually the last mistake they make. I added a new line to my notebook that night. 4. Miles H. Openly plotting advancement through manipulation. Refers to leadership as dinosaurs. Dinosaurs ruled the earth for 165 million years. Mammals like Miles were just snacks. The break room on the 12th floor was designed to foster synergy. In reality, it fostered high-fructose corn syrup addiction and treason. It was an open-plan kitchen with exposed brick, an espresso machine that cost more than a Honda Civic, and a long communal table made of reclaimed barnwood. It was the sort of place where people were supposed to bond. Instead was where knives were sharpened. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was under the sink, supposedly fixing a leaky trap, but actually tightening a bolt that wasn't loose just to stay in the room. The cabinet doors were slightly ajar, giving me a view of the ankles and shoes of everyone who entered. Miles walked in. I knew his shoes by now. Pointed brown leather. Click, clack, click. He was followed by the shuffle of sneakers. Jason, a junior developer. Jason was brilliant. I'd seen his code commits on the private server I still monitored at night. He was the kind of quiet genius who built the engine while people like Miles painted the racing stripes. "I don't know, Miles," Jason was saying, his voice thick with anxiety. "The data migration isn't stable yet. If we push the update on Friday, we risk a 4% data loss. That's thousands of user accounts. I need another week." Heard the hiss of the espresso machine. Miles was making himself a cappuccino while Jason poured his heart out about structural integrity. "Jason, Jason, Jason," Miles purred. The sound was patronizing, like an adult explaining tax law to a toddler. "You're thinking like an engineer. You need to think like a winner. The client expects the rollout on Friday. If we delay, we look weak. I promised Henderson we'd deliver." "You promised?" Jason's sneakers squeaked as he shifted weight. "But you didn't ask me." "It's my code. It's our team, buddy." Miles said, "Look, here's what's going to happen. We launch Friday. If there are bugs, we patch them Monday. It's called agile development. Look it up. That's not agile. That's reckless," Jason argued, showing a rare spine. "If we lose data, it's a PR nightmare. I can't sign off on this." There was a pause. The espresso machine stopped hissing. "You don't have to sign off," Jason, Miles said, his voice dropping an octave. It became cold, devoid of the fake camaraderie. "I already told Henderson the code is ready. If you contradict me in the stand-up meeting, you're not just making me look bad. You're making the department look incompetent. And I heard HR is looking to trim the headcount in engineering next month. Hate for you to be on the wrong list." My hand froze on the wrench. I was staring at the rusty pipe under the sink. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just being a jerk. This was blackmail. This was gambling with the company's reputation to save his own face. Jason went silent. I could practically hear his spirit breaking. He had student loans. He had rent. He didn't have the political capital to fight a guy who played golf with the VPs. "Okay," Jason whispered. "I'll patch it as best I can. That's the spirit. Miles clapped his hands. A loud jarring sound. Team player. I love it. Hey, grab me a sugar packet while you're there. They walked out. I stayed under the sink for a long time. The smell of the damp wood and the moldy darkness under the cabinet felt appropriate. I felt sick. This was what my company had become, a place where the innovators were bulleted into silence by the imitators. I crawled out, my knees cracking. I stood up and washed my hands in the sink they had just used. I looked at my face in the chrome reflection of the faucet. It looked tired. But beneath the fatigue, the steel was hardening. I wasn't just going to fire Miles. That was too easy. Firing him was a transaction. I needed to perform an exorcism. I pulled out my phone, a burner flip phone I used for the cover, and dialed a number from memory. It went to a secure voicemail box that only 3 people in the world knew about: the head of internal auditing, a woman named Grace, who I had hired 20 years ago. Grace, I said, I voiced low. It's a leaner. Don't ask where I am. I need you to flag all code commits from the 12th floor product team. Specifically, look for a forced push scheduled for Friday. And Grace, do not let that update go live. Sandbox it. Let them think it's live, but keep it isolated. I want to see exactly what happens when it crashes. I hung up. Miles wanted to play chicken with a cliff. Fine. I was going to move the cliff. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being in a room full of people who have decided you don't exist. It's not the solitude of a mountaintop. It's the solitude of a ghost haunting a dinner party. By the 4th week, I was haunting the boardroom. The weekly strategy sync was held in the aquarium, the main glass-walled conference room on the executive floor. I was sent in mid-meeting because someone had spilled a smoothie, kale, and an aisle by the smell of it on the side table. The room was filled with directors and VPs. Miles wasn't there. He wasn't high enough on the food chain yet. But his spirit animal, a director named Chad, was leading the meeting. Chad was everything Miles wanted to be. Louder, richer, and even more detached from reality. I entered quietly, bucket in tow. No one stopped talking. No one looked up. The issue isn't the product, Chad was saying, pointing a laser pointer at a graph that was trending disturbingly downward. The issue is the legacy drag. We have too many support staff. Too much overhead. We need to trim the fat. I sprayed the green sludge on the table. Trim the fat, I thought, funny coming from a man whose expense account includes client dinners at steakhouses that charge $50 for a baked potato. Exactly. A VP nodded. We need to pivot to a leaner model. Automation outsourcing. Are we paying full benefits for Tier 1 support? It's a cost center. I scrubbed the table. The rhythm of my arm moving back and forth was hypnotic. Swish, swish. They were talking about people I knew. People like Maria in customer service who sent Henderson cards to clients when their pets died. People like Old Man Jenkins in the mailroom who had been with us since the garage days. They weren't people to Chad. They were drag. They were red ink on a spreadsheet. Don't get me started on facilities. Chad laughed, spinning a pen. I mean, look at this place. Do we really need a battalion of janitors? Half the time I don't even know what they do. I froze. I was standing 3 feet from him. My hand was on the table he was leaning on. I was right there. The disconnect was so profound it was almost psychedelic. He was looking at the graph and I was cleaning his mess and he was asking what I did. It's background noise. Another executive chimed in. Line item expenses. We can cut 15% there easily. Switch to a contract agency. Lowest bidder background noise. I finished cleaning the spot. I stood up straight. For a fleeting, dangerous second, I considered dropping the act. I imagined the look on Chad's face if I pulled the pins out of my hair, wiped the grime off my face, and said, actually, Chad, reason the graph is going down is because you alienated our core user base with that disastrous interface update you forced through last quarter. But I didn't. The trap wasn't ready yet. Excuse me, I whispered, navigating the mop bucket around Chad's chair. He didn't move his legs. I had to lift the bucket over his expensive shoes. Watch it, he snapped, brushing a speck of non-existent dust from his pant leg. He didn't look at me. I walked out of the aquarium, heart hammering the rhythm of pure cold fury against my ribs. Background noise. That afternoon, I went to the server room. As a janitor,
I had the master key for cleaning purposes. The irony was delicious. The most secure room in the building, guarded by biometrics and firewalls, was accessible to the lady with the mop because dust is the enemy of servers. I locked the door from the inside. I put down my bucket. I sat at the terminal. My fingers, usually stiff from wringing out rags, flew across the keyboard. I wasn't Ellie the cleaner anymore. I was a leaner heart lead architect. I pulled up Chad's departmental logs. I pulled up Miles's project files. I pulled up the HR complaints database, the one they thought was encrypted against prying eyes. I saw it all. The patterns, the muffled complaints, the restructuring plans that were just code for firing the people who ask questions. Found a folder on Miles's shared drive titled Q4 Strategy. I opened it. It wasn't a strategy. It was a hit list. A detailed plan to discredit the current VP of product, the one he was currently sucking up to by framing him for the data migration failure. The very failure Miles was engineering with Jason's code. He was going to crash the system, blame his boss, and step in as the savior. It was Machiavellian. It was evil, and it was documented. Copied the folder to a secure cloud drive. Background noise, I thought, staring at the progress bar. You're about to find out just how loud the background can get. The line between ambition and cruelty is often just a matter of audience. Some people are cruel because they enjoy it. Others, like Miles, are cruel because they think it performs well for the crowd. It was Friday. The dread of the software update hung over the engineering team like a storm cloud. Miles was walking on air. He was already celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet. It was 2 p.m. The lunch rush was over. I was in the 12th floor kitchenette emptying the trash. The smell of microwaved fish lingered in the air, a corporate crime in itself. Miles walked in with two other junior associates, Brad and Kyle. They were laughing. That loud braying laughter that signals a pack mentality. I'm telling you, it was hilarious. Miles was saying actually thought I was going to recommend her for the lead role. I told her, babe, you're great at organization. Maybe stick to scheduling. They held. Then Miles saw me. Or rather, he saw an opportunity. He was holding a half-eaten chocolate donut, a jelly-filled powdered sugar mess. He looked at Brad, then at me, a smirk curling his lips. Watch this, he whispered, loud enough for me to hear. He walked over to the trash can. I was changing. I was bent over, eyeing the bag. Whoops, he said. He dropped the donut. But he didn't drop it in the can. He dropped it directly onto my head. The powdered sugar puffed into my hair. The jelly smeared against my neck. It was a wet, sticky, humiliating impact. I froze. The shock was physical. It wasn't pain. It was the sheer indignity of it. Oh, my bad. Miles exclaimed, his voice dripping with fake concern. Slipped out of my hand. Gravity, right? It's a killer. Brad and Kyle were snickering. Hands over their mouths. I stood up slowly. I turned around. I could feel the jelly sliding down my collar. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a flush that had nothing to do with the temperature. I looked Miles in the eye. For the first time, I didn't look at his shoes. I didn't look at his chin. I looked right into his watery, soulless pupils. You did that on purpose, I said. My voice was low, steady. No, sir, no mumble. Miles's smile faltered for a microcond. Hardened, he stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive mints and rot. Excuse me, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I think you're confused. Accidents happen just like it would be an accident if a complaint was filed about your attitude. I hear the contracting agency has a zero-tolerance policy for rudeness to staff. You need this job, don't you, Ellie? He read my name tag with a sneer. Clean it up, he said, gesturing to the powdered sugar on the floor, ignoring the mess in my hair. And don't talk to me unless I paid you. You're here to serve, not to speak. He turned and walked out. His goons followed, casting pitying/amused glances back at me. I stood there, shaking, not with fear, with a rage so pure, so crystallized, it felt like I had swallowed a diamond. I went to the utility sink. I washed the jelly out of my hair with abrasive hand soap. I scrubbed my neck until it was raw. I looked at myself in the mirror. Wet hair, red eyes, gray jumpsuit. You want to play gravity, Miles? I thought, wiping my face with a rough paper towel. Fine. Let's test the physics of a free fall. I didn't go home that night. I stayed in the building. I went to the subs. I pulled the camera footage from the kitchenette. I saved the clip. Miles H. Salt/harassment 2:03 p.m. Then I went deeper. I accessed the HR payroll system. I found out Miles's salary. I found out his bonus structure. I found out that he had expensed a client dinner at a strip club in Vegas last month and labeled it consultation fees. I compiled it all. The code sabotage, the bullying, the fraud, the donut. I created a masterl. I named it the cleanse. I wasn't just a janitor anymore. It was the Grim Reaper with a mop, and harvest time was coming. The email went out on Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. It pinged on 3,000 devices simultaneously. A digital ripple moving through the nervous system of Meridian Systems. Subject: mandatory all-hands meeting Q3 strategic pivot and special guest to all staff full-time, part-time, and contract from office of the board team. Please join us this Wednesday at 10 a.m. in the Grand Auditorium for a critical update regarding the future of Meridian. Attendance is mandatory. We will be joined by founder Aileen Earhart for a special address. I was mopping the hallway outside the open plan bullpen when the notification hit. I saw heads pop up like prairie dogs. Elena Hart, I heard a junior designer whisper. I thought she was like retired in the Alps or something. She's a legend. Another said, Professor used her code as a case study. And then I heard Miles. He was leaning back in his ergonomic chair, feet on his desk. Another violation if I was counting, reading the email on his phone. Great, he groaned loud enough for the whole pod to hear. The founder, just what we need. A history lesson from the grandma of the internet. I bet she's coming to announce she's donating our bonuses to a cat shelter. Chad, the director, chuckled from his office doorway. Careful, Isles. She's still the majority shareholder. Although word is she's senile, probably just coming to wave and collect a dividend check. I just hope she doesn't drag it out, Miles said, spinning a pen. I have a lunch reservation at Handwritten at noon. I'm celebrating the launch. The launch. The software update was scheduled to go live right after the all hands. He thought he was minutes away from victory. He didn't know the code was sandboxed. Didn't know his success was a simulation I had authorized Grace to run. I squeezed the mop handle senile. I finished my shift in a fugue state. I wasn't cleaning floors. I was rehearsing. That evening, I went to my temporary apartment. I laid out my clothes on the bed, not the gray jumpsuit. I unzipped the garment bag I had brought from Georgetown. I pulled out a navy blue Armani power suit. Sharp shoulders, tailored waist, silk lining. Pulled out the pearl necklace my mother gave me, the one I wore when I rang the bell at NASDAQ 10 years ago. I pulled out the heels, 3 in of Italian leather designed to crush egos. I sat at the wobbly table with my index cards. I didn't need a teleprompter. I wrote 3 bullet points on a single card. 1. Identity. 2. Integrity. 3. Eviction. I visualized the auditorium. I knew the acoustics. I knew exactly where the light hit the stage. Tuesday passed in a blur of anticipation. The office was buzzing. People were cleaning up their desks, trying to look busy. Miles was strutting around like a peacock in heat, telling anyone who would listen that he hoped he'd get a chance to interface with the founder and give her some modern perspective. *, I'm going to pitch her my vision. I heard him tell Brad in the bathroom while I was restocking paper towels. She needs to know the old way is dead. We need aggressive growth. She'll love me. Leaders recognize leaders. I was in the stall changing a role. I paused. Leaders recognize leaders, I thought. And predators recognize prey. Miles, you just haven't realized which one you are yet. Wednesday morning arrived. The sky was gray, the air crisp. I arrived at the building at 7 a.m. I swiped my key card. Not the LE contractor badge, the black card, the master access card. The security guard, new guy named Dave, who usually ignored me, looked at the card reader as it beeped a cheerful, high-priority tone. He looked up confused. I was wearing a trench coat over my suit, a scarf covering my face, and sunglasses. Morning, Dave, I said. My voice was different. It was the CEO voice. Morning, ma'am, he stammered. I walked to the elevators. I didn't go to the basement to change into my jumpsuit.
Jumpsuit. I pressed the button for the penthouse, holding Sweet behind the stage. It was time to suit up. The auditorium was filling up. I could hear the hum of 1,000 conversations vibrating through the floorboards of the backstage holding room. It sounded like a hive. I stood in front of the illuminated makeup mirror. The gray jumpsuit was gone. The bun was gone. My hair was down, styled in the silver blonde waves that had graced the cover of Forbes. Applied a shade of lipstick called Red Vengeance. Okay, it was actually crimson, but today it felt like vengeance. I checked my watch. 9:55 a.m. I slipped on my trench coat again, buttoning it to the chin and put on the oversized sunglasses. I needed to get from the holding room to the stage wings without being recognized by the back row stragglers. I took the service elevator down 1 floor to the stage level. The doors opened and, of course, has a sense of humor. Miles was there. He was with Chad and the VP Henderson. They were waiting for the VIP elevator to take them to the front row. They were laughing. So I told him Chad was saying, if you want work-life balance, go work at the post office. This is Meridian. They laughed. Miles saw me, a woman in a trench coat and sunglasses coming out of the service elevator. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just another random body in his way. Excuse us, Miles said, brushing past me to get to the elevator button. He literally shouldered me aside. Staff entrance is that way, honey, honey. He pressed the button impatiently. Who was that? Henderson asked, glancing at me as I walked toward the stage door. Probably catering, Miles said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Or maybe the founder's as nurse. I heard she's frail. I paused. My hand hovered over the door handle to the stage wings. Frail, turned my head slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of Miles's profile one last time. He was checking his tie in the reflection of the elevator doors, pining. He looked so confident, so sure of his place in the universe. I smiled beneath my scarf. It was a wolfish smile. Enjoy the elevator ride. Miles, I thought it's the last time you're going up. I pushed through the heavy door and entered the wings of the stage. The stage manager, veteran named Mike, who had been with me for 15 years, was standing there with a headset. He looked at me, trench coat, sunglasses. I took off the glasses. I unbuttoned the coat and let it slide off my shoulders. Mike caught it. He saw the navy suit. He saw the pearls. He saw the look in my eyes. His eyes went wide. Then a slow grin spread across his face. He knew. He didn't know the details, but he knew the look. It was the war paint look. Welcome back, boss, he whispered. Good to be back, Mike, I said. Is the mic live? Hot and ready. You're up into minutes. Intro video is playing now. I looked out past the curtain. The giant screen was playing a montage of Meridian's history. Inspirational music swelled. Images of young me coding in a garage flickered by. The crowd applauded politely. It was the applause of obligation. The video ended. The screen went black. A single spotlight hit center stage. Ladies and gentlemen, voice boomed. Please welcome the founder of Meridian Systems, Elena Hart. I took a deep breath. I channeled every ounce of rage, every drop of spilled coffee, every clean this up, every stolen code commit, and every powdered sugar donut into my spine. I stepped into the light. The sound of heels on a wooden stage is distinct. Click, click, click. It's a percussive sound, assertive and sharp. I walked to the center of the stage. The spotlight blinded me for a second. My eyes adjusted. I saw them. 700 people in the auditorium. Another 2,000 live streaming. The applause started, then faltered, then turned into a confused murmur. Why? Because I didn't wave. I didn't smile my benevolent founder smile. I stood behind the podium, gripping the edges with hands that were still rough from a month of manual labor, and I stared dead at the front row. Silence rippled outward from the stage like a shockwave. I found him. Isles was in the center of the first row, right next to Chad and Henderson. He was clapping politely, a bored expression on his face. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. I saw the moment the neurons fired. I saw the confusion first. She looks familiar, then the puzzle pieces slamming together. The height, the eyes, the hands, the voice he had heard mumble yes or 100 times. His hands stopped clapping. They froze in midair. His mouth opened slightly. Blood drained from his face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. He went from tan to gray in 3 seconds. Next to him, Chad was squinting. He whispered something to Miles. Miles didn't answer. He was paralyzed. He looked like he was having a stroke. I leaned into the microphone. Good morning, I said. My voice boomed through the auditorium. It was the CEO voice, but with a new texture, a grit that hadn't been there before. It's been a while, I continued, scanning the room. For most of you, I've been a portrait in the hallway, a ghost story, a signature on a paycheck. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. But for some of you, I said, locking eyes with Miles, I've been much closer. I've been riding in the elevator with you. I've been cleaning your conference rooms. I've been picking up your trash. A collective gasp went through the room. A murmur of what and no way. Miles sank into his chair. Looked like he wanted to dissolve into the upholstery. For the past month, I said, I have been working undercover as a member of the facilities team. I wore a gray jumpsuit. I scrubbed your toilets, and I listened. I saw panic erupt in the eyes of the directors. Phones were being pulled out. I listened to how you speak to each other when you think power isn't watching. I watched how you treat the people who keep this building standing, and I saw what this culture has become. Took a sip of water. The sound of the glass touching the coaster was amplified in the deadly quiet room. I built Meridian on integrity, I said, my voice rising. I built it on the idea that every person in the room matters. But somewhere along the way, we started mistaking arrogance for competence. We started mistaking cruelty for leadership. I pointed a finger, not vaguely at the crowd, specifically at the front row. I saw managers taking credit for their team's work, he said, staring at Chad. I saw executives planning layoffs while booking first-class retreats, I said, staring at the HR director. And I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying calm. I saw an associate product manager throw a donut at a janitor because he thought it was funny. Miles flinched as if I had slapped him. The people around him physically recoiled, creating a gap in the seating. He told her to clean it up, I said. He told her she was background noise. Stood up straighter. I looked 10 feet tall. Well, I said I cleaned it up. And now I'm going to clean house. Miles Henderson, I said. The name hung in the air. Please stand up. He didn't move. He couldn't. He was shaking. Stand up, I commanded. Slowly, painfully, Miles rose. He looked like a child called to the principal's office, stripped of all his corporate armor. You have a launch scheduled for noon today, I said. The Q3 update pushed it through despite your engineer, Jason, warning you it would delete user data. You plan to blame the failure on your VP, the VP, Henderson. Turned to look at Miles with a look of pure betrayal. How do I know? I ask. Because I read your files. I read them while I was mopping the server room floor. I clicked a remote. The giant screen behind me changed. It wasn't a PowerPoint. It was the video clip. Miles in the kitchenette, laughing, dropping the donut on my head, snickering. The audience gasped. A sound of genuine disgust filled the hall. This, I said, pointing at the screen, is not Meridian. This is a liability. I turned back to Miles. Your launch has been sandboxed, I told him. The code will not go live. Your plan to frame your boss has been documented and sent to legal, and your employment at Meridian Systems ends right now. Security.
Real security. Not the lobby guards. Walk down the aisle. 2 large men in black suits. Please escort Mr. Henderson out of the building. I said he doesn't need to clear his desk. We'll mail him his things in a trash bag. Miles tried to speak. He stammered, but it was a joke. Get him out, I said. They took him by the arms. As they dragged him up the aisle, he looked back at me. He looked at the woman in the navy suit. And then he looked at the floor he was walking on. Oh, and Miles called out into the microphone. He stopped. The room held its breath. You missed a spot, I said. The door swung shut behind him. I turned back to the crowd. The silence was different now. It wasn't confused. It was respectful, terrified, but respectful. This is day 1 of the new Meridian, I said. We are initiating a full audit of our management culture. If you treat your staff like furniture, update your resume. If you think kindness is a weakness, leave now. Looked at the back of the room where the facility staff were standing by the doors. I saw Maria. I saw the guy from the mailroom. To the facilities team, I said, my voice softening. To the support staff, to the assistants, I see you. And starting today, everyone else will, too. We are raising the base wage for all support staff by 20% effective immediately. And we are implementing a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect. The applause started at the back. It was wild. Raucous cheering. Then the engineers joined in. Then the middle managers. Finally, even the front row stood up and clapped, fearing for their lives. I walked off the stage. 1 hour later, I was in my old office, the real one. The view of DC was spectacular. My assistant, who had tears in her eyes, walked in. "Miss Hart, there's a bucket outside your door." I smiled. "Bring it in." She brought in the squeaky yellow mop bucket. Reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of very expensive scotch. I poured 2 glasses, one for me and one for the empty chair opposite me. I looked at the bucket. It was ugly. It smelled of lemon and grime, but it was the most beautiful thing in the room. I took a sip of scotch. It burned just like the anger had. But now the anger was gone. It was replaced by the warm, clean feeling of a job well done. Miles was gone. The rot was cut out. The ghost had returned to the machine, and she had brought a sledgehammer. I raised my glass to the bucket. "To the janitors," I whispered, "and to the messes we clean up." I drank alone, and for the first time in years the office felt